civilian deaths. Their leader, Ahmed Dariye, has just been freed after 84 days in jail without charge. He says he was imprisoned for speaking out against the bombardment of civilian areas. And he accuses the president and his deputies of human rights crimes. He said that nobody can hide what government leaders said because they said it on the radio. They would warn of operations in an area, for example, of the pasta factory, and the people were too poor to evacuate, and so the next day shelling began. The West's support for the government is supposed to defeat the Islamist threat in Somalia. Dariye tells me the military operations are doing the opposite. He says, if a tank kills your family and as a result you take up an AK-47, are you a terrorist or are you defending yourself? As they leave, Dariye lists the individuals he thinks should be investigated. They are very specific about General Darwish, the President Abdullah Yusuf, Gamadere, the former Interior Minister, and these men, they say, are guilty of crimes that need to be investigated by the international courts. We made repeated efforts to interview the President, but he refused to see us. The Somali government denies all wrongdoing and says civilian casualties are the fault of insurgents who base themselves in residential areas. They've started a roadblock. We've been in Mogadishu for 2 weeks. We get a call from a top politician. He says we've been asking too many questions. Then he issues death threats against members of our team.
Put that body armor on.
Yeah. It's time to get out of Mogadishu. I want to return to Britain to ask our government why it supports a regime accused of torture, extortion, the obstruction of humanitarian aid, and indiscriminate bombing of civilians. I want to ask about the Somali leaders with their British homes, passports, and British backing. Outside the Foreign Office in London, a group of British Somalis are protesting against UK support for the Somali government and its leaders.
They live in Leicester, they live in Birmingham, they live in London. I know them.
It is not fair and right that they go back and kill innocent children and they come to Britain and they get traded and they take our taxes. That is not really fair. We want everybody to be happy. We are human beings, we're not animals. Yes. Our people is cheaper than animals. Come on, you guys.
The Minister for Africa is Lord Malloch Brown.
The British government is directly supporting the institutions such as the police forces. Thousands of police officers have had their salaries paid partly by Britain. And yet I've spoken to people in Mogadishu who have been detained mainly for ransom by those police forces. How can you continue to support the police?
Well, because, you know, our support is to reform the police. I mean,
But they're detaining people.
Well,
they're ransoming them.
But I think, Aidan, the point here is that you cannot have a state that functions and protects its citizens without an effective police force. So we're trying to make the police force better, and that seems a reasonable goal given their behaviour.
I spoke to victims of the National Security Agency who were thrown in a dungeon and witnessed torture, people's fingernails being pulled out. Is this a government that you can work with?
Look, those kinds of practices we absolutely can't work with, and getting in there with aid, it is not to condone what's happening on the human rights side, it's to try and correct it.
You talk of aid, but millions of pounds spent by Britain supplying refugees have been blocked by the government. Is that acceptable?
No, it's not acceptable. But again, I come back to the fact this government is, from our point of view, a small shadow of light or a way out of this hell, living hell, that is modern-day Somalia.
So you can work with President Abdullahi Yusuf, and you do work with figures like General Darwish and the former Interior Minister Gamaderi. These are people that Britain works with, that you give them money.
Well, you know, very few, we don't write checks to any of them. This is a very controlled aid program around very specific objectives that...
Well, their salaries are paid, you pay their travel,
well,
you've assisted in governance programs.
Yeah, well, exactly, because there are only two choices. To pass by on the other side of the street, withdraw our program, say everybody's just too venal, too bad, we're going to leave this country to be a killing fields, a self-generated killing fields, or in this arena of very bad choices, we try to get in to help the more decent people, knowing that you have to rub shoulders with the devil to do it.
Before I left Mogadishu, I had stopped at the Medina hospital to say goodbye to the chief surgeon, Mohammed Yusuf.
They almost killed me.
He tells me that morning he'd been attacked by bandits.
They beat me with the butt of the gun, and they took me to another place, hidden place, to shoot me.
So you were saved by the fact that they perhaps got scared off?
Yeah. Otherwise, I was not here this morning in the hospital.
Inside, 1-year-old Ayub has a bullet lodged in his brain. He's suffering seizures. His mother knows if he's not evacuated for surgery soon, he will die. And the bullet is still in his skull.
For us, it's impossible.
Since we filmed this, Ayub has fallen into a coma. The fighting is getting worse. Somalis tell me how much they want Britain's help to end 17 years of anarchy. But they think what we've done so far has helped instead to create a catastrophe.
There's blood on the floor, there's blood on the walls, there's blood on everybody in here. Despite having blood everywhere, it's one of the only few rooms in the city where I've seen any hope. Dr. Mohammed Yusuf, together with his team, are trying to patch up people while the politicians and the militias on both sides in the conflict kill each other. It must get you down, Doctor, that you have to do this year after year.
It's a big problem, it's a big problem. We are continuing helping each other, but peace will come. We are hoping.